Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's stream. Today I'm going to be taking a look at, well, not really a look at, I'm going to be playing, in theory, in the background here, Northern Fury 1 H Hour. But today I'm also joined by a special guest in the form of Bart, who's the author and scenario designer behind the Northern Fury series. Hello, Bart.
Hi, how are you doing?
So today I'm gonna be mainly kind of having a chat with Bart and maybe Joel if he shows up. He's got a lot on his plate right now, so he may not be here. But me and Bart here are gonna be chatting about the new book, and I'm gonna probably just get my ass kicked here on the actual scenario. Uh, but I guess let's go ahead and get started here, and I'll hit play. And so, speaking of kind of the book, how kind of closely did I guess the first question is whose idea was it? Did you guys go to Matrix or did Matrix come to you guys?
It was my idea. I've had this book in mind for probably 25 years now, since the early 90s. I first started designing the scenarios in Harpoon Admiral's Edition, I think, or maybe, yeah, I think it was. I tried in the original Harpoon and then Commander's Edition, but Admiral's Edition was where the first scenarios happened. So the story has been in my brain for a long time, and I started building the scenarios, and
Whoa,
then
hang on a second. I need to mute sounds here in game because that's super loud.
oh,
Don't want game sounds. Game sounds are gonna get really annoying hearing vampires going off. And so it begins.
yeah, yeah.
Looks like I got vampires.
You may want to turn off show emissions for
That
all contacts because
that
it's going to get really busy.
see. Normally, I only have that turned on for.
So contact emissions down a little bit there,
Oh,
and then just selected contacts.
oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Normally, I do keep that on. Same with merge range symbols.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, I usually stay. I usually look at scenarios like this and they scare me. I am definitely kind of, this isn't really a testament for, criticism of you, but I'm definitely a fan of like Mark Ellis's scenarios where it's like nice and small and I know what's going on and I can see all my forces on like one zoom level.
Yeah. No, I like playing Mark scenarios when I'm tired home from work and I just need to relax a little bit. My scenarios scare me sometimes. So you picture yourself on at just the H hour of World War III, and if they're going to hit you, they're going to hit you hard. So as I was saying to you earlier, this scenario is not for the player to win; it's for the player to survive.
Okay.
It's relatively intact, and the victory conditions will show a win, but not your traditional win, where you control the sky and the sea. The bad guys will definitely control much of it by the end of it.
I have a feeling this is one of those scenarios where you kind of wish you could actually like that the campaign function was a little better.
Yeah,
I don't, or not better, but where it's easier to kind of transfer units between scenarios because it would be kind of curious, depending on how you did in this scenario to kind of carry those forces through with you.
so and these scenarios were built. This one in particular, probably 4 years ago now, before the campaign module even came out. But what I try and do is I aggregate the losses that I had and the losses that I inflicted on the bad guys over 2 or 3 playtests, and then I roll that into the next series or next scenario in the play. And the next one in this scenario set is Bartifoss Blues. So you'll have casualties, and in the opening narrative for Bartifoss Blues, you've got the number of pilots that became aces, the number of casualties you took, and the number of missiles you've got left, that sort of thing. So I try and replicate that.
So did you guys kind of do the same thing when you guys were how much of the book was kind of pre-planned, or or how much did you guys have to kind of fill in the blank, so to speak?
So the book was very much pre-planned. The story arcs and that is laid out. What we use the game for are the vignettes, and those that have read through will have experienced some air-to-air combat and some surface ship combat and some submarine combat. Those vignettes are either pretty much what we pulled from the game or an amalgam of several different playthroughs that we did.
Okay, so you sort of did kind of the same kind of play testing, kind of multiple times for the book to kind of get a kind of a mean average of how things would have gone.
Yeah, and there's a few things that we've got to protect story-wise, but generally speaking, nothing's sacred. And if on 3 play tests a certain ship sank twice, it's not surviving, unless we need that ship for something else.
And there's also probably some characters that it's like, all right, this, no matter what happens, this character kind of has to survive.
Correct, because the story, as we say in the preface, is about the people that are experiencing this, and the scenarios are a way of telling their story, and it gives us some pretty cool little vignettes.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm actually really looking forward to digging. Like I said, I would have dug into. Oh, looks like I got a unit stuck on the land over here. Who's stuck? Looks like the Rask is stuck in the...
Yeah.
Alright, go to full and get off the land there.
Yeah, that's not good. Because he's definitely needed.
The gunboat?
Well, he's got missiles.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've always kind of... I know there's, what is it, the first Contact series of scenarios that released, I think, with the game, where it's the Norwegian missile boats versus the Soviet/Russian, depending on the year that you you chose. And I always found that scenario really interesting.
It is fascinating. And what my only concern with the scenario, the first Contact series of scenarios, is that you play with the missile boats largely in isolation, and as this scenario will show you, nothing up here happens in isolation.
Yeah.
You've got shore-based radars, you've got air-based radars, you've got jammers, you've got submarines, you've got all sorts of stuff. So those missile boats are not alone, which is kind of
a flaw. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's a flaw of the original scenario design, because obviously something like this is a massive scenario, and there's benefits to both.
Well, I think those scenarios were designed almost as a first-line tutorial as well, just to get you familiar with the sensors and ship combat. But as well, a complex scenario like this does scare people.
Yeah, I've actually taken a look at the Scent-Front Air War, essentially. What is it? Operation Dreamland, essentially, if you want to use RSR terminology, a couple of times. And I've looked at that, and I'm like, I don't even know, at least early in Commands Live, I've looked at that and was like, I don't even know if the game could run this scenario.
Yeah.
And then just the sheer amount of movement involved in that. I mean, I tried to, cut it down to just a little tiny section of it, and it's like, you really can't do it with the region.
Yeah, that's I got to say that's one reason I stayed away from Central Front. At least on the flanks, you can control the
size of the
count
engagement
moderately. Yeah, like what's the AU count here? It's 1250. It'll creep up to over 2,000, but that's easily manageable by the game. when it first came out 5 years ago, an AU count of over 3,000 would slow the game down considerably. It doesn't anymore.
That and it actually I don't want to say my problem, but like my issue is like, especially when I stream command, I actually do have to watch the unit count.
Yeah.
Which is kind of one of those reasons why I also haven't streamed Northern Fury kind of sooner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I probably would have touched it years ago, but it's just I actually have to, with the recording, I do have to actually pay a little bit of attention to the size.
Yeah.
I remember my very first command stream, I actually broke the stream. Or I broke the game. I had basically done the old load up Kula, and I basically put a bunch of hypothetical, BBGs and, the floating island or the floating mobile bases all up in the Norwegian Sea, and I basically just told them, I did a massive missile strike from the BBGs and some B-1s and whatever bombers I had, and the missile launch was just too much, and I broke the game.
Yeah. The game will probably handle that now.
It can handle it just fine now, but that was, God, what's that been, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
It's a scary.
Yeah. So some of the final series or scenarios in the series will be quite large like that. I think the largest to date is besides Longest War, which is it covers the entire Atlantic, but the largest one where you're actually fighting is shoulder to shoulder, and that's pretty big. It's got 4 U.S. carrier groups.
Oh my God.
2 Brit carriers and the Clemenceau, I believe. So.
Wow, that's a lot of carriers.
Plus a very large land-based air wing.
Please tell me that all the U.S. carriers have F-14s. Because, if they have F-14s, I will go play it, my next scenario.
So they all have F-14s except for... There's one... Let me get my spreadsheet out here, one sec. There's one of them that's still around that's too small for it.
One of the Midways?
Where is it? Yeah. The Ranger. Oh, no. The Ranger's got 1 squadron of F-14s. Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious from the scenario design perspective. Did you go ahead and basically orbat the entire NATO and Warsaw Pact from top to bottom before you started this, or have you kind of been going through it as you go along, or?
A little bit of both. The U.S. Navy and the Russian Navy, pretty much top to bottom. U.S. Air Force, yes. Russian Air Force, not so much. Or Soviet Air Force, not so much. As NATO and Warsaw Pact nations come into the play, that's when I start mapping them. But they're all pretty much mapped out now. And on the website, I think you've got everything except Poland. And that's just because I haven't gotten around to it. But
oh, wait, you have these up on a website?
Yeah.
Oh, I may have to go download that.
Okay, it's let me just.
I think it's
just northernfury.us.
I may have to go download that. I'm kind of like a collector of Orbats. Yeah. It's I do the same thing in Google. I randomly post different military bases and stuff like that just because it's what I do.
Fair enough.
Because I may need them in a scenario someday.
Yeah.
Why I'll ever need Tinker Air Force Base in a scenario, I don't know, but you never know.
Well, I mapped it out because I had to plot through all the reinforcement timelines, and the long pole in the tent there. Sorry, that's a Canadian Army term, but basically the thing that matters the most is tankers. So I swagged the number of tankers it would take to get a squadron across the Atlantic, and then just tried to schedule them in by then.
On a completely different subject, probably one of my favorite recent scenarios was from the Desert Storm, and that was that very first scenario where you basically had to move the entire U.S. Air Force from Europe and CONUS to Saudi Arabia. That
Yeah,
is probably the most unique scenario I have seen in a long time.
yeah, it is. It is pretty good. The closest one I've got to that is Mediterranean Fury 3, where you've got about 6 squadrons flowing into the Med during the scenario. They're all on a non-player side at first, and then based on situations, then parts of them will get cut over to the player and lure it over to the player side. But you've got to protect them all as they're coming in without missiles, mostly.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that was an interesting one to build, um, but it became big.
Yeah, I know the feeling. My I've been working on Operation El Dorado Canyon now for about 3 years. I think
Yeah.
is how long I've been working on that scenario, and it went from just like this tiny little thing to I don't want to say it's a monstrosity, but it's a lot bigger and more complex than I actually was originally had planned for.
I think the term is scenario creep.
Yeah, but I had a conversation with SSN 754 in my the other day, and it's like, well, the Libyans really did launch fighters during Operation El Dorado Canyon. They were just smart and they didn't follow the strike force, but they could have.
Yeah.
So because they could have, that means I have to, have a random chance that they could follow the player's forces.
Right.
Just because it's a potential.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that as creep necessarily. I mean, I don't
No,
I don't have to have it.
so this is getting back to Mark's scenario. He shows a lot more discipline than I do because um, although I try and get every possibility into the scenario and I work to get them all functioning, I think he sits back and says, well, what does the player really need? And cuts it back to the bare bones, which is something that takes discipline.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with him about some of the Desert Storm First Night scenario. I'm like, this seems really kind of scaled down versus what I would actually imagine, and that was pretty much his response was that he, if he tried to do the entire First Night strikes, it would just be too big.
Yeah, and I think there's a scenario or two out there on the community forum that try that, and they're pretty massive.